Welcome on into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Today, we're going to go over some trade targets for the Broncos. Following the NFL draft, we usually see a couple of moves go down. So I just want to put some names on your radars. Maybe guys Sean Payton and George Payton could explore a trade for. So let's jump into it, starting with a wide receiver, Treylon Burks. We talked about him earlier this past week as a potential trade target due to the Tennessee Titans signing every wide receiver in existence, excluding the fact that they have a first-round pick out of Arkansas from 2022. Now, Burks has been a bit of a disappointment. I think that's a fair criticism to say. Through 2 seasons, he's played a total of 22 games, and his stat line through 22 games looks like the stat line of a slightly underwhelming first-round pick for just 1 season, not 2 seasons. 665 yards and 1 touchdown. I'm pretty confident at this point that actions speak louder than words for Tennessee, and they have signed a couple of free agent wide receivers since drafting Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and another guy this past week, his name escaping me, but I think Burks will be dealt at some point, whether it's this week, next month, before the season starts, even at the NFL trade deadline. I believe Treylon Burks will be moved before the NFL trade deadline is over. And maybe it's a team like the Broncos that when you look at their wide receiver room, it's kind of in a weird spot, right? Like Courtland Sutton comes off a 10-touchdown season, but he also didn't show a lot of great yards after the catch ability. Didn't have 1,000 yards. Marvin Mims, I think, is poised for a breakout season, but that's all it is, poised. I don't think we saw enough in year 1 to know this is a surefire thing. Josh Reynolds had a solid year for the Lions, but he's not a long-term play at wide receiver for Denver. So if the Broncos feel like, hey, the Titans were misusing Treylon Burks and we still think he has that first-round potential in him, and all it costs is a 5th-round pick, it's a no-brainer for us. So here's one trade idea. Denver gets Burks. The Titans get a 5th-round pick. Jerry Jeudy went for a 5th and a 6th, but he was also much more expensive because he was on his 5th-year option, whereas Burks is a lot cheaper for a team if they want to move on from him if it doesn't work out. Next trade target is tight end, I guess we'll call him that, Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints. You can probably connect the dots yourself as to why we're talking about Taysom Hill, because we need to satisfy Sean Payton's Saints itch. Every few months, Sean Payton goes, I've had way too long of a break without signing or hiring a former coach or player of mine from New Orleans. So maybe now he decides, let's trade for one in Taysom Hill, who Sean Payton loved. I mean, look at Taysom Hill's stats from that 2020 season, the last time Sean Payton was his coach. Right? No, 2021 was the last time. But still, both those seasons, nearly 1,000 passing yards, right? 13 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns. And then the last 2 years under Dennis Allen has not been used the same. The passing yards, a dramatic drop-off. And so if Sean Payton wants to help his rookie quarterback out by maybe taking some of the pressure off of Bo Nix by getting Taysom Hill involved from here to there, I could see the tight end room welcoming Taysom Hill with open arms, because this is not a tight end room that I think is one of the strongest in the NFL. Adam Trautman showed some good flashes last year. If Greg Dulcich can stay healthy, then I think he'd be a really solid tight end. But at this point, I don't think we can bank on Greg Dulcich staying healthy. So if a trade were to happen for Taysom Hill, financially, it would cost the Saints a little bit, like to the tune of nearly $17 million in dead money. But they would save $10 million against the cap. And the Saints do love to kick the can down the road, restructure contracts, push money towards the end of the contract. And they did that for a long time. And those guys they did that on, they are nearing the end of their contracts. Taysom Hill being one of those players. So this may be a move that New Orleans makes, not because they want to move on from Taysom Hill, but they feel like we're not utilizing him the way that Sean Payton paid him, right? That's when you got that contract with Payton in charge. So we might as well just kind of cut our losses. And sure, we'll eat some dead money, but we'll get some good cap savings, and we'll get a draft pick in return. So what about this? Taysom Hill for a 2026 5th-round draft pick. The guy's 33, 34 years old. I'm not sure how much gas he has left in the tank. So for the Broncos, I don't see them giving up a draft pick in this upcoming draft, but maybe a future 5th-round pick, and both sides agree this is a win-win. Now, would you be open to trading for Taysom Hill? Yes or no? I want to know what you have to say about this one down below in the comment section. Third trade target, linebacker Zaven Collins, former first-round pick by the Arizona Cardinals out of Tulsa, had his 5th-year option declined by Arizona after 3 seasons, and he's already got some familiarity with a certain someone on the Broncos coaching staff. Oh yeah, Vance Joseph, who was the DC down in Arizona. Collins started 22 games under Vance Joseph. So this could be someone like we saw with Zach Allen, who was a defensive end that followed Vance Joseph to Denver. Maybe Vance Joseph kind of puts his head on the table and says, we need Collins. Like, I'm not going to throw a hissy fit over it, but I do think he's a good player that last year was one of the better linebackers, I'll say, in football. Showed some versatility from being an inside linebacker to outside linebacker. And when you look at Denver's linebacker room, they kind of like that in their linebackers. Baron Browning made the jump from inside to outside. It looks like they want to do the same thing with Drew Sanders. So if they do move Drew Sanders to outside linebacker, all of a sudden your inside linebackers are Alex Singleton, Cody Barton, Justin Stranad, Jonas Griffith, and Alec Maka UDFA from Air Force. You are one injury away from a UDFA starting at linebacker that maybe you didn't plan on. So there could be some much needed depth, but more importantly, this could be a player that the Broncos feel like is being misused down in Arizona. The Cardinals seem to have a habit for drafting players and then not knowing where to put them on the field. We've seen this happen one too many times. So I wouldn't be surprised if Collins, kind of like Isaiah Simmons, could benefit from a change of scenery. And Vance Joseph goes, I know what buttons to push. Let's get him to Denver. So in this trade scenario, I think it'd be something similar to the Jerry Jeudy trade, a 5th and a 6th going over to the Arizona Cardinals. Collins is cheaper than Jerry Jeudy, so you think you get a little bit more, or the Cardinals would get a little bit more for him than the Broncos got for Jerry Jeudy, but also wide receiver is more valuable than a linebacker. So I think a 5th and a 6th is in the ballpark for what you could expect to get in a Zaven Collins trade. We're going to look at 2 more trade targets for Denver, but first, make sure to subscribe to the channel. All of our content here is completely free, which means if you don't like it, you can actually always unsubscribe. And it's not one of those deals where I've got your credit card information, and if you don't cancel in a week, we're going to bill you. No, it's completely free, so hit the sub button down below. Help us reach 22,000 subscribers. 4th trade target, another Saint, you guessed it, Marshon Lattimore, the cornerback, who was a first-round pick out of Ohio State. His name has been in the news the last few weeks because Sean Payton has done a great job of reminding everyone he really wanted to take Patrick Mahomes in 2017, but had to settle for Lattimore, which that's not a bad thing to settle for. 4-time Pro Bowler. However, he has dealt with injuries the last 2 years. He was very healthy for the first few years of his NFL career. The last 2 seasons, he's missed a combined 17 games. That's like missing a whole season. But despite that, I still think he is a very good football player, and he's got some good value because he's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He's one of the best cornerbacks in football when healthy. The Saints are in an interesting dilemma. One, they are always in salary cap hell, so their guys will always be somewhat available if a team is willing to take that contract off their books. 2, look at their DB room for a moment. It's pretty crowded, actually. Like Marshon Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, Jordan Howard, Tyrann Mathieu, Paulson Adebo, and then they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama. They've got a lot of good DBs, so maybe they feel like this is a deep enough room where moving on from Marshon Lattimore would not be a dramatic setback because they got a next man up mentality, and it would help their cap issues and get a draft pick in the process. Meanwhile, Denver's DB room is in a very different state than New Orleans, right? You got Patrick Surtain, and then after that, you've got a lot of vacancies / question marks. Like Jaquan McMillan was awesome for the second half of last year. Brandon Jones got a 3-year, $20 million contract, so he'll be starting. PJ Locke has shown some potential, just need him to stay on the field. Levi Wallace is just a Band-Aid. He's just a veteran corner that's there to hold down the fort, in case Riley Moss or Damari Mathis do not prove they are starting caliber corners in this league. But if Denver comes to the realization that they don't like their DB room outside of PS2, what about getting Marshon Lattimore? Another reunion for Sean Payton, which we have seen many. And I think the Saints would settle for a fourth-round pick. Lattimore's got a pretty big contract. You guys saw the dead cap hit. So Denver would be doing the Saints a little bit of a favor, taking that contract off their books, which means you're not going to get as big of a draft pick in return. But a fourth may be something New Orleans is willing to settle for. Fifth and final trade target, we'll keep it in the DB family. How about Tre Brown from the Seattle Seahawks? Not as big of a name as the first four guys, but I think this just goes to show not every trade is going to be a blockbuster one. Fourth-round pick back in 2021, started 10 games through the first 3 years in Seattle, including 7 last year. However, the Seahawks have made numerous additions to their cornerback room, right? They drafted Devin Witherspoon. They got a whole bunch of guys that have joined. Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen. It goes on and on. So Tre Brown may find himself kind of on the outside looking in, and Seattle may feel like, you know what, he's a good player. He's not good enough to be in our starting rotation, but he can start elsewhere, and we'll take a draft pick for a guy that was likely going to sit on the bench for us. Tre Brown is your very, very much cheaper option than Marshon Lattimore if Denver is serious about upgrading their cornerback room. The Broncos did not draft a corner. I'm not quite sure if that was by design or if they felt like we have a lot of faith in our DBs. We don't need to add to this room. Even if you have faith in your corners, in my opinion, you should always replenish at cornerstone pieces. Quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback. Those 5 positions go top 10 in the draft more than any other position. Why? Because they are fundamental positions. They are cornerstone pieces. If you are rebuilding a team, you start at those positions. So even if Denver does like their corners, they may view it as a spot where you can never have enough good corners. I mean, that's something George Payton installed day one when he got to Denver, right? Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby free agent selections, and then free agent signings, and then draft selections like Patrick Surtain, Riley Moss. So wouldn't be shocked if Denver goes, we kind of regret not getting a corner in the draft. Let's trade a pick for one and get Tre Brown over to Mile High. I think this would be a very simple trade. 7th-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks. Maybe it's like a day 3 pick swap where a 6th and a 7th go each other's ways, but I don't think Tre Brown's going to cost you much at all. So which trade would you want to do? Treylon Burks, Taysom Hill, Zaven Collins, maybe Marshon Lattimore, or potentially Tre Brown like we just talked about. Type 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the comment section below. Let me know which trade you would like to do. Personally, I would go the Zaven Collins trade for best bang for your buck. Marshon Lattimore is the best player of the 5 guys we talked about today, but he's also going to cost you the most, and not only in that being in draft capital given up, but cap space, the contract you're taking on. Whereas Collins declined 5th-year option. He's got 1 more year left on his deal, so if it doesn't work out, you're not out a lot of money, and you're not out of a lot of draft capital. So for me, I would go with Collins, especially with Alex Singleton getting up in the age column, his contract coming to an end shortly. Cody Barton's on a 1-year deal. Drew Sanders may be looking to go from inside to outside linebacker. Collins could be a good trade for now and also for the future. That will do it for us on today's show. Really, really appreciate everyone who tunes in to our coverage here. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, leave us a comment, like the video, and make sure to subscribe.